The Honourable Taylor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I've given this subject quite a lot of consideration since we last visited this issue a few years ago. My views have changed vastly since then due to developments, some negative and some positive, regarding the practice of pill testing and drugs currently classed as illicit. First and foremost, my concern, as the previous speaker mentioned, is the concern in the increasing rise of substances such as fentanyl, nitazenes, and N-methoxybenzyl or N-bomb, which has been found contaminating many other substances in the market and which can easily lead to fatal consequences, and they have. We are fortunate that in Australia we are a well-protected and somewhat isolated island continent, unlike the USA or Canada and other countries where fentanyl and the like is easier to import and add to substances. Not so much for the purpose of adding them to cut them down and fill them out, but rather it's used to enhance the effect of those other substances purchased and make that drug more potent. This has been a factor which has been seen a serious crisis, particularly in North America, which we all should be very concerned about. Should these synthetics or substances like them ever get a real foothold here in Australia? At the moment, without sufficient testing to flag the adulteration of certain well-known substances such as ecstasy or ketamine with other lethal and seriously dangerous substances, we are effectively saying to these people that they're completely on their own. And despite having the ability to reduce harm via testing, we are unnecessarily letting our young people be the canaries down this coal mine. We have this opportunity to save lives, and we should take it. Saying just say no is not going to work going forward, should we see the trends overseas taking hold here. Even looking back, saying just say no has not worked, and to many people who take this approach and genuinely think it's a serious strategy, then I would say to them, congratulations. To have such a view and to not have been exposed to or to even understand the deep trauma that some people have had to deal with in their lives, where they may well turn to such substances for respite, and I envy you. But to ignore the warnings where the illicit drug market is headed, and to intentionally remain affixed and ignoring the looming issues, for example, with the dwindling supply of traditional opiates, particularly out of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, and the widespread increase of extremely potent synthetic opiates around the world, is to be dangerously negligent. Introducing testing actually introduces some of the positive elements of a well-regulated market, and in other jurisdictions, they've seen that over time, manufacturers succumb to the pressure not to adulterate their products because it will be picked up on and they will face market repercussions and a loss of business. It gives recreational drug users, typically young people, the opportunity they otherwise wouldn't have to discuss what they are about to ingest in their body with a health professional. It gives an opportunity to present to these people the facts of what they're about to take and how it may affect their body and just what they are risking. In the UK, a study found that 20% of those who presented with substances to be tested disposed of them after testing, and that this experience had led to a majority of these festival goers to dispose of other substances also, not only what they presented there on that day. A clear piece of evidence showing that rather than giving a false sense of security and potentially encouraging more illicit drug use, pill testing actually changes the perceptions and behaviour of those who are already purchasing and consuming illicit drugs. Ironically enough, introducing pill testing seems to have a sobering effect on the attitudes towards these substances, with the people who need to have some more rationality when it comes to recreational drugs, drug users themselves. I understand the views put by the opposition that the adulteration of drugs is a lesser threat than the actual intended substance, particularly MDMA, known as ecstasy. These were my views a few years ago too, when we debated and voted against pill testing when I was a member of the then government. Identifying and removing these adulterating substances is a positive step, which not only helps the individuals who have their substances tested, but they can see the use of these substances reduced drastically in other jurisdictions where testing has been trialled or implemented. Introducing young people to members of New South Wales Health and other organisations, they're at the point at which they're about to ingest them, is a very positive step which can greatly assist those festival goers in altering their decision making right there before they're about to make that decision. And I acknowledge that the opposition's key argument against such a trial is that their view is that it's not the adulterations causing previous deaths here in New South Wales, but rather the high dose MDMA found to be the cause of deaths in many cases here in New South Wales. Professor Measham from the University of Liverpool in the UK, who founded the Loop drug checking service, where they utilise mass loss analysis to provide a fast and accurate method of quantifying particular MDMA out in the field. And this has been used to great success in the UK very recently. Now, why wouldn't we want to see that used here in New South Wales to really put a lid on those high-dose deaths? We can address the issue of adulteration of substances and high-dose issues, as well as providing health professionals a chance to educate these people and explain why there is no safe level of drug use. Other jurisdictions, particularly here in Australia, ensure that exact messaging, that there is no safe level of drug use, is plastered across these testing centres, and I imagine that this messaging would be echoed strongly here in New South Wales throughout any centres. Importantly, it gives professionals an opportunity to reiterate to users that mixing drugs can be fatal. Polydrug complications are the #1 cause of drug-related deaths over in the UK, and Professor Measham found in a 2022 study that half of testing service users surveyed were more cautious about mixing drugs after their interactions with the testing service. Providing testing gives the opportunity to those conversations, for those conversations to be had just before those drugs are ingested. I understand the government will hold their long-awaited drug summit later on this year. Summer is coming up. It's been a long winter. The cost of living is increasing, and no one is feeling that more than our state's youth. The pressures around drug use are manifold. It is not as simple as young people looking for a high during an outing, as easy as it might be to paint that picture when we talk about it here in this chamber. I have sympathy with the view that stakeholders must be consulted when it comes to implementing such a scheme, particularly health and police, but this is not rocket science. Chemistry, maybe, but not rocket science. Other jurisdictions can do it, and they have done it to great effect. In fact, Professor Measham from the University of Liverpool, as I mentioned earlier, conducted a fact-finding trip which included Canada, New Zealand and here in Australia to survey how Commonwealth jurisdictions were addressing the issue. She claims that New South Wales Health provided advice that legislation was actually not required and that such a pill testing scheme could be set up pretty easily using the protocols in place for needle and syringe programs here in New South Wales. Given that there does seem to be a level of confusion in this chamber regarding the facts of implementing a scheme, Madam Deputy President, I move that the question be amended by omitting be now read a second time and inserting instead that the bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Social Issues for inquiry and report. I move this motion so that a final report can be produced ahead of the Government's Drug Summit for the purposes of collecting information and views from stakeholders in order to inform any possible trial that may be able to take place over this coming summer. I would prefer to see a bill drafted by the government rather than one proposed by the Greens, but in the absence of any move by the government to implement testing ahead of the upcoming festival season, I will have to vote for this bill with or without it being looked into by an upper house committee. I appreciate that the government will be reticent to move towards testing, as they will not want to be tarred with being seen as to encourage drug use. And I say that because whenever this proposal was flagged during the time that I was a member of the Berejiklian and Perrottet governments, it was often a point raised in discussions that any deaths that would come after testing is introduced could reflect extremely poorly on any government that introduces pill testing. This issue is too serious to worry about perceptions or polls. We have the opportunity to make a terribly murky market that much safer for our young people and for all recreational drug users and for people struggling with mental health or addiction here in New South Wales. Thank you.